Welcome to the Real Estate Show. From buying to selling and everything in between. Rochester's home for everything real estate. And now, your hosts from the Anthony Butera team of Keller Williams Realty, Greater Rochester. It's Anthony Butera and Jason Mancuso.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 93 of the Real Estate Show. We got Anthony and Jason here. Guys, welcome.
Welcome.
Now this looks like good news, but you guys are on the inside knowing this stuff. So the home sales were up 16%.
What?
For the country?
Oh, for the country.
That doesn't matter?
Yeah, but for what? May over May? Or
Let's see, released in
April
May.
from May?
New home sales month over month.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 580,000 in April to 276,000 in May.
I guess that would make sense. May, the guidelines started loosening up in May, so I guess it made sense. But if they're going off sales, Jason, that would mean closings, right?
Yeah, I'm curious what that data is, but I mean, I think just overall, I don't think it's inaccurate. It's just a matter of, the world was shut down in March and largely in April, and now it's back open and things are happening.
And I know we're syndicated worldwide, but it's funny how much different the national data can be from Rochester's market. We're our own entity, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
I think the only thing that runs in parallel would probably be consumer confidence on a national level, but Rochester just has it seems now it's the never-ending fight for inventory, but I'm feeling a little bit of a surge the last couple of days. I just feel like I'm going on listing appointments after listing appointments and trying to get stuff on the market, and it's not going to cure it's not going to be the cure-all because I have zero end in sight. There's no light anywhere that would indicate that this market's going to change anytime soon. I don't care what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely active out there, and I mean, it's super competitive. Again, same conversation every episode, just different spin to it. I mean, I think, if anything, I guess the hopeful optimism that we have on our end is that we're riding either at the peak or very close to it in terms of just how crazy it is with the amount of offers coming in on any given house, and more importantly, more specifically, the amount over asking price that these homes are selling for. These are, I've been saying it year over year. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. This is that times 100. So I think. Sorry, I'm on my phone and call came in. Hopeful optimism is that that just calms down a little bit, and it's the shift happening from it doesn't take $30,000 over asking price to win an offer, and maybe in 2 weeks from now it's only $20,000, and then 2 weeks later it's $10,000, something like that. Not to say that that's the timeline, but that can really be all that we can hope for at this point, at least representing buyers. For sellers, it's great, right? But just to kind of create that more of a normal, more normalcy for what we're used to in the last few years with this market. And that, what I'm saying is hopefully we could just go back to the good old days of $5,000-$10,000 over asking price can get you in. Right now, with most cases, you don't stand a chance with that quote unquote aggressive approach, which it is, but it's just not the market of the moment, unfortunately.
Is there anything where is there anything in Rochester where you start, how far outside of Rochester do you have to go where it's not the case? If you're, you know what I mean? How far into the sticks are there certain towns that aren't hit as hard type of thing, or is it just everywhere?
I would say Monroe County, and then the majority of Ontario County, majority of Wayne County, still crazy. Not to the extent that we're in right here, just based on the density, but like Orleans County, things are a little bit different, right? But it's really everywhere, because what you're finding is, like, I'll use a scenario for like the west side. What you're finding is, like, the people that wanted Greece were willing to go to Hamlin, and like the people that wanted Hamlin are now willing to cross the county border and go into Kendall.
Okay.
And what I'm finding, and it's funny because, you know, I'm in contact with a lot of sellers, is the one thing that's changing right now is now the sellers they're gathering the data from closings that just happened recently, which were in this time frame of our new level of chaos. And so now there's like, I felt like just a few weeks ago, I was having conversations with sellers and they're going, wow, really? You think we could get that much? And now that shock, that happy shock, is now turning into an expectation. And that's going to be the first set of symptoms where you're going to stop seeing the 10, 20, 30,000 over ask price. Is everyone's changing their pricing strategy, and the biggest motivator is the motivation from the sellers to capture that top dollar, because they're going to see, they don't care that Frank and Judy's house across the street was listed at 130 and they got 155. They want to list at 155. Right?
In hopes we're getting 175.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen.
Not a great strategy.
You know, no, it's not, and it's tough.
You know,
it's tough for us as salespeople, because they don't understand. It's tough to digest the logic that Frank and Judy got 155 because they listed at 130.
Right.
If they listed at 155, they may not have gotten 155.
Right, and it's just like kind of the never-ending increasing expectation type of thing with the extreme sellers market that we've been in for years now, and now seeing what the results are, where we're at right now, and closing starting to come in, given the lack of inventory. Yeah, it's almost never-ending. Now, I think, you know, so I think you described it great as like a symptom that causes change. That's it. Coupled with, you know, the buyer pool just saying, all right, enough is enough. This is ridiculous. It's one thing if I got to pay 155 when it's listed at 130. It's another thing if I got to go over 155 when it's listed at 155. And that's like, there's nothing to justify the 155 other than the slow data that's trickling in. Most people don't have the wherewithal to be able, rightfully so, frankly, to be able to, you know, like ignore what the past data is and just kind of go off of like gut feeling or you know, instinct. Couple things to touch on to revert back, like to the more rural areas. Yes, it comes down a bit, but there's also that many fewer homes for sale as well. So I don't necessarily think you avoid competition as a buyer the further out you go. It may just be instead of 10 or 20 offers, there's 3 or 4. And as a seller, you know, that's where pricing it right becomes even more apparent, because you may only have, you know, you get way out there, you may only have, you know, and you have a unique property, say, as an example, there may only be 4 qualified buyers for that home out in, you know, whatever, Albion, that's 300,000. Right. Yep. So, I mean, you just got to be careful with it.
My new, I shouldn't say it's a script, although it kind of is, but it's a script with validity behind it. You know, when I'm trying to explain to the sellers of why we have to price it right to get that top dollar, here's what I see happening. I'll use that same hypothetical example of Frank and Judy's house selling for 155, although it was listed for 130. When you can list it at 130, and we can get 8 interested parties that want to write that offer, 6 of the 8 really, really want that house. 2 of the 8 can't live without it. They have to have it. And when you get 2 parties that have to have it, that's when you get those offers that have escalations. And we'll talk about this a little bit. They're writing escalations with no cap. They're willing to pay whatever they have to pay to get that house. But if we listed Frank and Judy's for 155, No one has to have, you're not going to have 8 parties. You may have 2, and then you got to cross your finger that one of the 2's willing to move the post 2 or above the 155. And now they're wondering, like, wait a second, this Apple stock was worth 150, nothing's changed. Now you're asking 160. Like, that doesn't make sense to us. And you're going to discourage people from offering, and you're going to have, they're going to confide in their agents, and their agent's going to say, guys, they're listing it way too high out of the gates. So for a buyer, if if there's a hot property and you want to get in ASAP, like if you're qualified for 200,000, you may want to set your limits at 175, knowing that you may have to go 25,000 over to get that property.
Yeah, for sure. That's a thing. And look if you're actively working with an agent, you got to make sure that they have the pulse on the market and can kind of update you week by week of is it changing at all? Yes or no? And, if you're uncomfortable with getting super aggressive, then you may have to sit on the sideline for a couple of weeks, and hopefully, to your benefit in that case, that it calms down a little bit.
Yeah.
We wanted to address kind of review. We've addressed it before over the years, but just review hey, this is what it looks like right now to make a strong offer. If you want to kind of put yourself in the best position possible to win this house, you have to have this house. If you're coming to us with this is what we're going to tell you. Now, I want to dive into something before we do that. I've kind of changed my thinking or kind of emphasized it more this week around how quality, how much of a factor a low interest rate is for you as a buyer. And whether you're buying your first home or whether you're, this especially applies to the scenario where if you're a seller and you're going to sell your home for more than you ever thought you could have, but you're fearful of buying the next home and quote unquote overpaying. Think of it this way. Let's say you sell your home for $30,000 more than what you're expecting, but then you have to pay $30,000 more than you really wanted to for that home. For this scenario, in most cases, it's a long-term move. And think of the low interest rate being the determining factor that gives you, a win through this scenario of almost like a zero-sum game between the equity gain that you have from your sale and, quote unquote, overpaying potentially. That $30,000 wash on both ends. Well, if the rate's not going to stay as low as it is forever. Okay. And I would feel pretty confident to say that in a couple of years down the road, it's going to be, significantly higher than what it is now. I don't think we're going to 10%, but just, the difference between 3% and change versus 5 or 6% is massive. So if you buy 2 years from now for $30,000 less, but at a higher interest rate, you're losing compared to what it is now. And that's not a sales pitch. That's if you're going to be in a home for 30 years, here's your motivation. Lock in the low interest rate for that 30-year time. You're saving a massive amount of money. You have your agent, have your lender, not your agent, work the amortization chart or, just the total amount of interest that you're paying over that term. If you're there in that house, it's going to be a significant amount of money. And now you can kind of, have that in the back of your head when you're fearful of paying too much for a home. I mean, it should be, no matter what, if it's going to be your forever home, it should be the home that you want, and it should be something that you're excited about and kind of willing to throw a big number at. Just be comforted by the interest rate.
No, it's a great point, Jason. And I feel like whenever we're making big decisions or big purchases in our life, we're always grasping at straws for a justification, and it's a really good justification.
Yeah, I think it's something that we're too quick to point to whatever I sell my house for now, I'm just gonna lose that in the back end of it when I buy. Well, you're not really, assuming that the rate goes up, because now if you do something 2 years from now, Your home may not sell as for crazy of a number. I think it's still going to sell for a good number. You know, if you bought your home 5 years ago, you're good no matter what. It may not sell for as much as it would today. You may not have to buy for as much as you would today.
Popular guy.
Yeah, jeez.
Sorry. But, you know, as I was saying, you're going to make up for it. It's going to be a win with the lower interest rate. So keep that in mind.
And in your next struggle, when you have to make another big decision, if you do buy now, I'll tell you what your next challenge is going to be. If you have to sell in 5 years or 10 years, the house no longer suits you, you're being relocated, or you're sick of looking at your wife, you're going to get really down in the dumps when the rates are at 6% and you're coming from a 2.5 to a 3.25, right? Like that's kind of where the rates are right now. I've seen as little as 2.5 on a 15-year conventional, and that's going to be depression because, yeah, you may feel like you're overpaying today, but that interest rate is going to follow you. So the ability to borrow more money cheap in the end will prove to be the safer bet.
Yep. Nope. I think it's all valid. I think we can have a brief conversation on what it takes to make a strong offer in this market. And if you're new to the real estate market locally here, you know, right now, in recent years anyway, and leading up to this point, you're going to think we're freaking nuts. But this conversation applies to, you know, if we're working with a buyer and they're telling us, hey, I have to have this home, tell me what to do. Well, here's what you have to do. You have to make, and, you know, right now, June 25th, 2020, you have to make an obnoxiously high number, you know, something that we're not going to be able to look at comparable sales and be able to justify. You know, again, as we've said in the past, we'll still tell you whether we feel like it's somewhat safe or not. But, you know, the way things are going right now, a lot of these numbers that homes are selling for, it's not going to be us being able to say, hey, yeah, no, you'll be good in 3 years. So it kind of comes down to, like, are you going to be there for at least a little bit? You know, like 3 years is a tight window. 5 to 7 years becomes that much better, but we don't have the crystal ball. To couple with the high number, you know, there's a term called an escalation clause, but now you even have to get aggressive with that, to where before you could kind of say, all right, I'm going to beat the next highest offer by $1,000 up to a certain amount. And now it's almost, you know, Anthony mentioned not having a cap on the amount. It's almost like you got to use a bigger amount that you're going to beat the other offer by to really set yourself apart, to say, hey, instead of the standard 1,000, or, you know, I haven't seen it in a while, but like it used to be, you could get away with even, you know, a low amount like $100, just to kick above the next offer. You got to be $3,000-$5,000 depending on the price range to really stand out. So that's, you know, addressing kind of the strong number aspect. A buyer that waives a home inspection is going to, a buyer that waives a home inspection is going to be at the top of the list compared to those that don't. It's a tough conversation to have, but it's truly one of the main factors that lead to, you know, success of winning an offer.
Do you think, from your perspective, well, I have a couple questions. So if like somebody, let's say somebody has $200,000, or like they're basically, they're like, the most we want to spend is $200,000. Do you just go to them, hey, look at houses in the 160, 170s, knowing that you're going to have to go over?
Yeah.
So my logic and my data that I would share is, it's fine to look at something for $200,000 if it's been on the market for a week.
Okay.
Right. But that hot property at 175, or that hot property at 200,000 that hits the market at your ceiling from a borrowing capacity, you're not going to have a shot. You're not, because that $200,000 house could be selling for $225, or you could write for $225 and you still may not get it. It could go for $230.
Yeah.
I just had a situation last week that we hit the market with a property for $299.9, and I'm telling you that, like, if I just went off of data, recent data, like $279.9, $289.9 should have been as high as we priced it, but I was happy with being able to put a 2 in front of the number instead of being at 3 something.
Yeah.
And this thing grew. I can't say the exact amount because it's not closed yet, and people do listen. But I can tell you that, like, $335,000 wouldn't have gotten this house. And the person that won, they went several thousand over the next highest offer with no ceiling. Like, they showed me a prequal letter with that was up to $400,000, right? So they really had no ceiling, and I'm sitting back. I can't share what's going on with these other agents that are sending offers in, and they have no idea that their offer is only being used to catapult that escalation, right? Like, no matter what you send me, how strong you think it is, all you're doing is making that other offer stronger. Let's say hypothetically it was $5,000 above and beyond. Like, you're only raising their offer higher and higher because they're going to beat you by 5,000 no matter what you do.
So on your end, you could see if somebody's doing the escalation clause?
Well, if we're the listing agent.
If we're the listing agent, yeah, we're going to see that within the offer.
And then my other question was about home inspectors. You know, if you waive the home inspection, like, so how risky is that? You know, how, like, weighing the risks of doing that.
I mean, yeah, it's risky, but here's a couple things to think about. Get yourself aligned with an agent that you're touring homes with that knows what they're looking for. I mean, I've only been doing this for 8 years, but with all the homes I've been in and out of, I'm saying this arrogantly, but I feel like I could be a home inspector at this point. Okay. So, your agent's job is to, chime in when they know that you're interested in a house and really start to tear it apart and kind of advise you on this, and this. Like, okay, this is good, this is bad. You're going to have to budget for this down in 3 years. You're going to deal with the roof conservatively in about 10 years. Really give you a home inspection right then and there before you write an offer. An agent should never be operating of like, oh yeah, they like it. They let's see if we can get something to stick. Then we'll get the home inspector in here to tell them what's right or wrong. In any market, that shouldn't be the relationship that you have with your agent. So, we and the people that we have on our team, all of our agents are trained to do that, to where, we're not going to, again, I spoke out of turn to say I feel like I'm a home inspector. We're not, we're going to let you know, hey, we can't really, this isn't our trade, but we've been in enough of these homes where we feel comfortable with telling you this, and that. So where from there, as the buyer, as the consumer, you should understand that you're buying a used home. There's going to be risks no matter what. You get a home inspection report, the first page of it is a full page of fine print covering their ass that, hey, at the time of today, June 25th at 12:30, I did an inspection that is visual only. I don't know what's going on inside the walls or anything that I can't see. Essentially, you as a buyer can see everything, the same things that a home inspector are, short of maybe taking, the cover off an electric panel and a furnace and really diving into it. I think you kind of go into it like assuming, worst case scenarios in some aspects and making sure that you're comfortable with that budget down the road.
Here's where I'm at. If you really want to buy and you really want to win in this market, outside of finding out if the foundation is crumbling, right? Outside of that, if you want a house and you're going to let a furnace or AC or a double tap breaker or a loose railing get in the way of you buying, get the fuck out of this market.
Don't buy a house. That's a great point.
Don't buy a house.
And that's a conversation.
I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to think like I get it. Like, yeah, I would want a home inspection too. And if you want a house, you may not be able to have both.
And that's right now in this market. And I think there's validity to that point in general in terms of like, look at, you're buying a house. You don't have the landlord to call anymore. So, you better be prepared for it to not be perfect and better be prepared for things to go wrong down the road. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's guaranteed to happen. The best report on a home inspection is not going to shelter you for the next 5 years of owning that home to having $0 be put into it to keep up with the upkeep. So it's like training yourself to know that, okay, I'm Johnny homeowner now. Home Depot on Saturday morning, let's freaking do it. Start sending gift cards for birthday presents. That just has to be your mentality. So, again, back to the market of the moment, you have a home inspection as a contingency. You're at the middle of the pack at best compared to others. And this is speaking from the amount of people that are waiving it and how they go to the top of the list in terms of how an offer, if there's 10 offers being presented to a seller, how they're being presented to the seller. Those ones that are waiving the home inspection and have strong numbers are at the top of the list compared to your strong number and having it contingent on inspection. There's just too much unknown that we don't know as the seller about that buyer till we get them through that inspection.
And we have to kind of coach the sellers too, right? Because, so often I go on listing appointments and we're about to hit the market, and it's really common for sellers to kind of have that prideful moment of, we don't care if they hold a home inspection. We know we have nothing to worry about. You don't know. You just don't know what's going on, because these home inspectors, most of them, they're comparing your home to today's building codes and today's standards. And your home was built in the 70s, and the standards have changed, and you guys are going to get matched up against today's standards. And depending who the buyers are, they're going to digest that information differently, right? Like, I know that a double tap breaker is just $100 fix from an electrician, but you start talking fire, they're picturing their kid's room on fire in the middle of the night. Like, that's a game changer. Lights out, the deal's dead.
Yep.
So
that's why we always present it to a seller of like, look, as whatever this buyer is telling us right now, I have no idea if it's going to stick or not till after we get through the home inspection a week from now.
Yep.
So, if you can avoid that, think of yourself as a seller. Now you're waiting on pins and needles for the next week after you got an accepted offer that's significantly over asking price. That can die just as quick as it was accepted. Mm-hmm. Now, seller, you have the leverage in this market where you go back on the market and chances are you'll be fine, but it's just a matter of the convenience factor, I guess. There's something to that in terms of value.
All right, guys. Well,
real quick, big deposits. This is more of a conversation, but if you're going significantly over asking price and you got the cash to be able to do so, you may have to cover the difference between the appraisal amount if it doesn't appraise to what your offer is. You really got to go out of your way to let your seller know, hey, I want this house and I'm proving it to you in the terms of my offer.
And think about it like this: as a buyer, you can't talk to the sellers. It's not allowed, right? So the only conversation you can have with sellers is the terms of your offer. That's the only conversation you can have. So if they were to just base your desire for their home on the terms of the contract, that's a really important conversation. There has to be a comfort level, not only for the sellers, but for the agents to relay how strong these terms are. So you got to be strong in terms. Make the offers less sticky. Give yourself less outs if you really want that house.
You need business cards that say, get the fuck out of this market, and you need to make it less sticky. I think
we have them, actually.
Yeah, we do have them. And if you don't like it, keep fucking going.
You can check out AnthonyButeroTeam.com. We got the Real Estate Show tab there. Subscribe. Check us out on YouTube, all that good stuff, and on Facebook. All right, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to The Real Estate Show. Find us on Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. If you're looking to sell or buy, talk to the Anthony Butera team of Keller Williams Realty, Greater Rochester. Visit AnthonyButeroTeam.com. realestate.com.